Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Late night was off this week, so I know myself pretty well, and sometimes I make what I call crinkly face. I'm going to tell you a story about Louis C.K. here, and in my mind, I want to say I'm not sure how I feel about it, but my face is kind of revealing to me how I feel about it. I'm combining several sources here, including IndieWire and The Hollywood Reporter. The story: Louis C.K.'s fall from grace will now be at the center of a #MeToo documentary for Showtime. The documentary will include the New York Times reporters who broke the story that C.K. had been accused of masturbating in front of 5 women. I'll give you some quotes here from Paramount Global top executive David Nivens. He called it a very interesting documentary, which I haven't seen yet. David, that's very Trump-like, that quote. Let me read it back. A very interesting documentary, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm looking forward to doing so. It's going to deal with all of the where are we now 4 or 5 years later after the Weinstein story broke. Another quote: Louis C.K. is in a slightly different situation compared to Harvey Weinstein. IndieWire quotes Julia Wolof, one of C.K.'s 5 accusers. She spoke out after Louis won the Grammy back in April 2022, so this is an older quote, but I thought I'd share it. Julia said at that time, "These big brands can't have Louis C.K. starring in a movie. Disney can't have Louis C.K., but a little black box comedy club can do whatever they want. Everyone is about the bottom line. If Louis can sell tickets for a small comedy club, then they will. I don't believe in cancel culture, but obviously Louis is not canceled. He seems fine to me. He's touring, he's selling out, he's winning Grammys." The AV Club wrote the following. I'm going to read 2 full paragraphs because I think they nailed it. "If you ever needed a clear example that so-called cancel culture isn't real and that certain people who've been accused of or admitted to misconduct have zero problem maintaining a similar level of success to what they had before, just look at Louis C.K." After the New York Times published accusations from multiple women who said they had a habit of exposing themselves to female colleagues and forcing them to watch him masturbate, he had admitted that the stories were true and pledged to, quote, step back and take a long time to listen, unquote. AV Club writes, that long time ended up being less than a year, with C.K. eventually going back to comedy and making movies like nothing had happened. He even won a Grammy earlier this year. Now Paramount is developing a documentary about Louis C.K. and his return, with Paramount TV head David Nivens saying that he doesn't think the social change that #MeToo has brought about is resolved at all. And now there's, quotes, a bit of backlash against Me Too over who has to go away and who's allowed to come back. This is going to be very interesting to follow. I'm recording this slightly after noon on Thursday. This just got announced on Thursday morning. I have already recorded the weekend for my scheduling reasons, but I'm curious. I suspect this will be the topic next week, which is good because normally right into Labor Day, it's slow and the Fringe is over now. So I won't have Fringe reviews for the second half of the podcast, and into Labor Day week and after Labor Day week, it's usually really slow. So maybe we'll get a little Louis C.K. discussion going. I'll also refer you to the recent C.K. appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, where C.K. was talking about the type of pornography he enjoys with instructions for people doing the kinds of activities Louis C.K. has become somewhat famous for. All very interesting. Moving on from AL.com, as in Alabama.com, TJ Miller was talking about writing jokes, and he said, I'll tell you some of the stuff I just wrote down. And he took out his phone and read from it. At a gas station, you can't eat anything in there. Everything they offer in a gas station is bad for you. There's not one good thing, so it's really weird to even go in there unless you're using the bathroom, which is also a bad situation. So you should never go into a gas station because it's all stuff that's terrible for you. TJ says, so, you write that down, and there's a bigger theme there, which is America and how food as drugs is pushed on you and how hard it is to be healthy in a capitalist society. It's more social satire as you get older, and then it's autobiographical. And if it's autobiographical, you're definitely not going to forget because it's about you. The subtopic there is writing down jokes as you think of them. He has another one. I just saw where there was like a Romeo and Juliet suicide in New York where they jumped off this thing called the Vessel, which is a relatively new 150-foot tall sculpture in New York City. TJ says, but it's stairs. You can climb up and people have been jumping off to kill themselves. And so these two people, they do Romeo and Juliet, but she chickened out. This guy died and she didn't do it. And I wrote that down. That's a really bad breakup. Maybe the worst breakup ever. Whose situation's worse, And then there's the janitor's day. So stuff like that. You have to write it down because you have to get the idea that just occurred to you and put that down. So that's 2 very different types of writing. Al.com was curious. Hey, you're doing some shows here in Alabama. Is there anything you find fascinating or interesting about Alabama? TJ said it's a very different South from South Carolina or even Greensboro, North Carolina. It's very different from Louisiana. It's very different from Florida, but Florida is different from everywhere. I'm fascinated by Florida. It's in my pandemic special how in the beginning when I started working, I can only go to the crazy places. So that was like, are you ready for this? Let me know if where you live is on TJ Miller's list of crazy places. So that was like Nashville, Tennessee, Tampa, Florida, Greensboro, North Carolina, Orlando, Florida, Houston, Texas, and Jacksonville, Florida, and Naples, Florida, and Miami. You get the picture. The Laugh Button shared a tweet from Gary Gulman. I am self-aware here that I just touched on this subject in a joking way with TJ Miller and Gary Gulman. I'm about to touch on a subject in a very serious way. I come in peace. I don't mean to be a jerk. This just happens to be the news of the day. Gary Gulman, quite seriously, tweeted back on August 15th, I was suicidal when Better Call Saul premiered. It was the only hour each week I found more comforting than the idea of oblivion. I vowed to defer ending things until I found out what happens to Saul. In the meantime, I got well. Thank you, Better Call Saul, for buying me some time. Wow. Gary's a good guy. I worked with him a little bit at Sirius. We were trying to get him a show at one point, and I forget why it didn't happen. A lot of comedians over the years I wanted to give shows to. That's a story for another day. From comicbook.com, Ian McKellen was recently invited to participate in a private discussion with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he was excited. He checked in with his contacts in Ukraine. He has contacts in Ukraine? Who has contacts in Ukraine? He checked in with his contacts in Ukraine to see if it could be legit, and they encouraged the actor to take the call. Well, it wasn't. It was prankster Russian comedians. Ian McKellen, he's Sir Ian McKellen, is he not? I believe he is. Mr. McKellen, I'm an American. I don't recognize your title. Mr. McKellen said, I'm not a politician, so I was surprised some weeks ago to receive a message that appeared to come from the Ukrainian embassy in London, inviting me to participate in a private discussion with President Zelensky. I checked with a couple of contacts in Ukraine who encouraged me to take the call. Who has contacts in Ukraine? At the appointed time, I found myself chatting, apparently, with the president of Ukraine. As it turned out, it was not Zelensky or any Ukrainian official, but one of a pair of Russians who call themselves comedians. I understand they're popular in Russia, which is surprising, because their jokes aren't funny. I played along with things they suggested, but was frankly bewildered that they seemed to think I might be in a position to provide substantial aid to Ukraine. Once I realized it was all just a dirty trick, I declined to cooperate any further. Hey, congratulations to Meghan Markle. She has knocked off Joe Rogan almost always. Joe Rogan has the #1 podcast on Spotify. Not as I record this. Meghan Markle's new podcast, Archetypes or Archetypes or whatever it is. That's #1 on the Spotify charts, which is very exciting because, as I regularly mention, I'm the writer on a podcast called Palace Intrigue, and we cover the royal family, and Meghan Markle moves the needles. We're getting a lot of downloads this week. So on behalf of host Mark Francis and I and everybody at Palace Intrigue, and by everybody at Palace Intrigue, I mean me and Mark Francis, we say, thanks, Meghan. There is a new episode of a podcast called The Best Song Ever This Week. Every week, music journalist Scott Frampton talks about a song and tells you why it's the best song ever this week. This week's The Best Song Ever this week is You Dropped a Bomb on Me by the Gap Band. In August, Scott is focusing on the summer of 1982. This week, You Dropped a Bomb on Me by the Gap Band filled dance floors and took Tulsa's Greenwood, Archer, and Pine Streets and their dark history around the world. I was out running this morning listening to Kill Tony. I'm on a Kill Tony kick. I know there's like 400 episodes of this and I'm late to the party. I'm late to the party, but I'm at the party now and I'm trying to make the party bigger because a lot of us are late to the party. So Kill Tony, they're in an Austin comedy club. Newbies get up and do 1 minute. Most of them suck. Some of them don't. On the most recent episode I listened to, I think it's the new one, Jeff Ross is the guest. I'll put the link in the show notes. Jeff Ross, the roast master. He's a great sniper, so he makes it funny. They absolutely destroyed this Italian guy who came on, and his set bombed. And then they were making fun of him. They're like, is there anything interesting about you? And then the guy shared that he lost his virginity to a prostitute in Amsterdam when the guy was 28. And I don't want to spoil the jokes, but it's a very funny segment. That's about 2/3 of the way through the episode. And then right after that, a newbie named Ike Rafferty got up and did his 1 minute. Ike Rafferty crushed to the point Tony Hinchcliffe invited Ike Rafferty to open for him in Florida next month. So keep an eye on Ike Rafferty. Kill Tony is a fantastic podcast. Check it out. From Tulsa World, the first thing you need to know about the Blue Whale Comedy Festival is this: don't go to the Blue Whale of Catoosa looking for laughs. Now, if you're from Queens, you're like, what are we talking about? Apparently, the Blue Whale of Catoosa is a Route 66 landmark. But that's not where the Blue Whale Comedy Festival is. Derek Combs is the event manager for the Blue Whale Comedy Festival and says, every year we get questions about what shows are going to be at the Blue Whale, and the number is exactly 0. No shows are going to be happening at the Blue Whale. The Blue Whale was chosen as a symbol for the festival because it's one of those unique landmarks along Route 66. Since this festival started in 2014, it's had some good names, including Michelle Wolf, Tig Notaro, Maria Bamford, Fortune Feimster, Michael Ian Black, Judah Friedlander, Brian Moses, Nikki Glazer, and Natasha Leggero. All right, well, who you got this year then, huh? Rory Scovel and Dan Soder. Rory tonight, Dan on Saturday, pretty good. Derek Combs said the festival was really picking up steam in 2018 and 2019, then came COVID, and everything just stopped. Fortunately, we've been able to pick up more or less where we left off. This year's festival is maybe a little stripped back from the 2019 event, but not that much. From LitHub.com, your home for comedy news, a comedy duo is replacing the covers of Jared Kushner's book with a new and improved version. The duo, The Good Liars, they are known for their previous work retitling Donald Trump Jr.'s book as Daddy, Please Love Me. Well, they've been replacing the cover of Jared Kushner's recent book. The new title is I Am Slender Man. Sean McCarthy was over at the Edinburgh Fringe. He saw a bunch of shows. He writes for a website called The Comics Comic, and I've been fortunate to be able to share that with my audience, but everybody should check out The Comics Comic and do right by Sean McCarthy. He gave 3.5 stars out of 5 to Morgan Jay's Emotional Damage. Mellow guitar music and singing about relationships. You'll either identify, want to hook up, or want to break up. If it's the latter, Morgan Jay says, if your relationship can't stand an hour with me, it wasn't meant to be. Morgan Jay has more than 600,000 followers on TikTok. Sean also gave 3 stars out of 5 to Laura Davis's If This Is It. Davis wonders about the push-pull of the Fringe, expecting your show to say something of value and criticizing you if you fail to mention whatever topic they value most of all. She has no delusions about the irony in people debating whether crap on canvas counts as art while trying to convince us that our crappy lives are still great, nor about the irony in how gender continues to play a role in our critical decisions. If she were a man, then she as he might be considered a brilliant satirist. As a woman, she's considered loud and bitter. But then again, as a woman in comedy, she spent 15 years hearing audiences demand to see her boobs. Are you happy now? Laura Davis, If This Is It. And that's your comedy news for today. I already told you, I pre-recorded the weekend. It's supposed to be nice. I'm heading to the beach. But normal episodes all weekend. It's good stuff. And you can follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're a premium subscriber on Apple Podcasts, you can get the episodes early. If you're listening to this sometime on Friday, the weekend episodes are already there for the premium subscriber crowd. $5 a month gets you the show ad-free and early releases. And even if you don't use those features, it's a good way to support the show. The $5, or at least most of it, Apple takes a cut, makes your way to me. You can also buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. There, whatever amount you want in the tip jar. Most people do $5. Some people do the $15 offer. Much appreciated. So thank you all for supporting the show. It's been another good week of downloads, and I'll see you here tomorrow.